Stay up to date on the latest political news this election season for less. Visit inforum.news/port and get 3 months of unlimited access to our news network for only 99 cents a month. Subscribe now at inforum.news/port. This podcast is brought to you by the North Dakota Petroleum Foundation. From heating our homes and powering our vehicles to cell phones, clothing, and medical equipment, oil and natural gas makes everyday life better. North Dakota Oil and Natural Gas, advancing the possibilities. Learn more at ndpetroleumfoundation.org. Forum Communications Company is proud to be a part of the Trust Project. Learn more at thetrustproject.org. Welcome to Plain Talk. Happy to be with you, and we have a great Wednesday show. Making a glorious return after some time off is Chad Oban, whose Dodgers have been playing well, whose Dodgers have taken the cast-offs from the New York Yankees and turned them into all-star players, Joey Gallo. That's got to be one of the most frustrating trades of my life. He was doing nothing for us. I don't know what else we could have done. He wasn't hitting. He goes to the Dodgers and apparently is now the best player in baseball.
It's better coaching. It's better sort of locker room mentality, that kind of thing. But I am happy to be back guest hosting Rob, because I looked at your ratings last week when I wasn't here, and they just went in the tank. I mean, that's what everybody's saying anyway.
That's fake news. That's the buzz. That's the buzz on Twitter or something.
Yeah, lots of people are saying it.
Let me respond to that by saying fake news. Joining me for our discussion today is NDGOP Chairman Perrie Schafer. Perrie, how you doing?
Thank you. I'm good, Chad. I'm good, Rob. Thank you very much for having me.
You know, I wanted to have you on. There was controversy over the last week or so with an organization, the North Dakota Young Republicans. And I want to start, maybe you could describe to me, because I think sometimes from the outside looking in, you know, most people aren't political professionals. Most people don't spend a lot of their lives invested in this. And I'm not criticizing them for that either. I could play, even as somebody who does politics for a living, I can understand people who just want to live their lives and not live the daily soap opera and drama that is politics. But I was wondering, first of all, if you could describe the relationship between the North Dakota Republican Party and the North Dakota Young Republicans. I know that at one point they had a vote on the state committee. That has since been changed, but they're still there with ex officio status. Run us through that.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Actually, they have the exact same status that Senator Kramer, Senator Hoeven, and Representative Armstrong have, which is ex officio members of the state committee. And they did have a vote for about 2 years before I was chairman, and the state committee chose to remove their vote, as well as the college Republicans. Frankly, because the college Republicans are in such disarray, don't even know who their chair people are. So there's no purpose in having a vote on something that you don't even know what who your leadership is. And from a Young Republican standpoint, Daryl Mindelman and Daryl is the chairman of the Young Republicans. We get along fine. He just sent a letter out, as a matter of fact, a few minutes ago before this podcast, basically stating the position of the Young Republicans. So I think your point earlier is well made. There's a lot of people that make comments and make statements maybe within an organization that don't represent the organization, and maybe they connect themselves with organizations that they're not even members of. So Daryl and I will have a phone call later today after this meeting, of course, and after my 11 o'clock meeting I have coming up, and just talk about, Rob, exactly that. But the general view of the NDGOP in our state committee is we welcome young Republicans, 18 to 40-year-olds. We have a great relationship with most of them. We have a lot of leadership in our NDGOP chairman's positions in our districts that are young Republicans. We have several on our executive board that are young Republicans. They just stand by the format and what we are, I guess, as Republicans from a platform standpoint, and they don't stand with the anarchy side of the organization. So,
Chairman Schafer, I like that the North Dakota GOP came down and condemned these comments, because I think it's really necessary that when we see this kind of language that we're forceful. But I got to be honest, you're sort of talking about like the North Dakota Young Republicans, their leadership doesn't agree with something, and these are just some radical people. But when you talk about the folks who are in that group, it's the District 11 endorsed candidate. It's the District 31 endorsed candidate. It's the District 7 endorsed candidate. It's the District 43 endorsed candidate. It's the District 8 endorsed candidate and 2 sitting legislators. And they were in this group, and they can say that we weren't really active in it, or, we didn't post things, but they didn't stand up and say this is bad. And as a matter of fact, when these comments were caught by Rob, their biggest response was, who's telling on us for saying these homophobic and racist things? So my question for you is, to say these comments are bad is one thing, but what is the North Dakota GOP going to do with this litany of GOP endorsed candidates who are part of these conversations? And you can't just say, I showed up at the meeting where people are saying bigoted stuff, but I was just there for the meal. I wasn't really paying attention. So what is the actual action that's the North Dakota GOP is going to take? Because again, this is a list of people who are probably 7 or 8 sitting legislators come January. And if this is what they are saying in private online, what are they going to do as legislators? And what are they saying to other people and trying to sort of pass along this hate? There needs to be real action here if we're going to stop this kind of dialogue.
I appreciate that statement. We're actually meeting tomorrow with several of us executive members and having a conversation about that very thing, Chad. To be very honest, I don't want to condemn someone until I actually know all the facts. All the individuals you listed with respect to, for example, District 43, District 7, District 31, which is my district, by the way. We have a meeting tonight on this. Part of the subject is this subject. I don't know what the connection is with all of these people. I do know that, excuse me, the regional chairman up in 43, up in the northeast, which encompasses District 43, has already had a conversation with the 2 individuals that were listed as part of the rogue chat that was going on from a Young Republican standpoint, and simply asked them to stand down, or there will be further action. Now, I don't know what that further action is. We do have a code of conduct, frankly. We passed that December 18th of last year. It wasn't unanimous. We had 8 individuals that left the meeting, weren't even involved in the conversation, which is to their demise and to the discredit of their districts. And we had about 5 or 6 in the room that voted against the code of conduct, believe it or not. And we have to be able to hold people accountable, to your point, Chad, when this is an organization. We get to choose who we associate with. And if you don't willing to hold up the values and the standards of the organization, we get to make that choice. Exactly how we're going to make that choice yet, I don't want to be presumptuous, and I don't want to be calling people out when I don't know exactly the whole story. So, and to your point as well, Chad, I did call the chairman of 11 this morning. Her and I will have a conversation later on today. She was one of them that was involved in that conversation, as well as her endorsed candidate, and simply stated the one that I saw, at least had made the majority of those bigoted comments, is the endorsed candidate from 11. And if that's the comments this individual is going to make, that does not represent our party. That individual needs to stand down. They need to replace him with someone else. So that's a conversation that the chairperson and I will have later today.
That's by the way, that's Carter Eisenberger, who's running for the state house in District 11, and I do think it's fair, Perrie, what you're talking about. I mean, as the person who, I mean, obviously broke this story and went through those text messages, there are degrees here, right? There were people like Mr. Eisenberg and the chairman of the NDSU College Republicans, or the president, I think his title is, who were being very explicit. They were using the slurs. And then they were saying, how proud they were, and even after I got in touch with them, we're repeating them, saying, there's a lot of bravado there in saying, look, we can do this and you can't do anything about it. Not that I was there to do anything about it. I'm just there to report. But there are degrees. I mean, I think we all know, like, you join a Facebook group or something. That doesn't necessarily mean you endorse everything that's going on in the Facebook group. How often did you see the messages? There is some plausible deniability here for a lot of the people on the list. And I do think we should be careful with it. I think that's what you're talking about. But there are some where it's pretty explicit. It's right. Pretty undeniable. And what worries me too is that a lot of people had to have seen the messages and didn't do anything about it. And that, to me, that's the troubling thing. Is not just that they were using the slurs, but how many, and it may be impossible to say who saw what. I don't know. But gosh, some people saw them and I didn't, there was nothing there. According to my sources that were on the group, nobody was pushing back. Nobody was saying, hey, this is but for my source who I guess brought it to me. Nobody was saying, hey, this is wrong. That really troubles me, Perrie.
It troubles me as well. And I have the list. I know who the individuals were, and I thank you, Rob and Chad, for your reporting. Bottom line is, we are an organization that has values and we have standards, and we promote that all over our state. And we're not going to stand for anyone that is within or outside of our organization that does not stand with the standards that we have put together, and not just what we've put together since I've been chairman, but this is a long-term scenario. This has been going on, building the North Dakota Republican Party for years and years and years and years and years. We look at 30 years of Republican control in our legislative process, and we say to ourselves, this is a good thing. North Dakota's in a good place. So part of my job is to make sure that individuals like the two of you are speaking of, and the North Dakota Republicans that were involved in this fiasco, which I don't approve of, they need to be dealt with. But what I don't want to do is jump to conclusions either. I want to be able to give people the ability to not necessarily defend themselves, but to explain where do you stand with the party, because you're either in the party or you're not. And that's the bottom line. So I will do that due diligence, and then we'll proceed from there.
Yeah, and I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but one of the things that that sort of took me aback was the NDSU college president, when he first talked to Rob. I mean, his first quote was, "We've been spending a lot of time trying to keep this secret, and so people aren't talking about this stuff." That's gross. I mean, that's gross if you're spending the majority of your time. And then Andrea Tolman, Rick Becker's former campaign manager, reminding everybody that stuff that's on the internet lives forever. So be careful what you're saying. Not don't say this or don't believe this, but be careful.
Or search your heart and find a better way.
Yeah, people might find this out. So, I'm going to ask a question here, Perrie, that may seem provocative, but I think it's important that you respond to this. I mean, I talk to a lot of my liberal friends who say everybody who's a Republican's a bigot. I don't believe that. I don't believe you're a bigot. I don't believe the majority of the Republicans I talk to is a bigot. But there's something happening that is attracting folks like this to the GOP party. And maybe it's because there's only one party to go to. I mean, maybe that's it. But at some point, is the tent too big? Or is the tent too big when folks like this are? So I'd like you to respond to that, because it is sort of a natural response from the left that, well, Republicans, they're all bigots, and I don't think that's true. But what would you say to that?
Yeah, first of all, that's an easy way out, isn't it? To have anybody call someone else a bigot just because you don't like their politics. Right. We actually defend the politics of Democrats. I have some really good friends that are Democrats. I love them to death as a Christian man. I don't agree with them. I don't agree with their policies. My neighbor is Heidi Heitkamp. I love her to death. I love her very, very much. She's a great lady. Don't agree with her at all. I've lobbied her many, many, many times in D.C. So having conversations, Rob and Chad, and talking about our differences is extremely different than being radically in any position, whether you're a Democrat or a so-called Republican. But keep in mind, we have the right to choose who's in our group. The tent isn't too big. I welcome everyone that believes in our format, that believes in our platform, that stands up for the rights and for the right to life, for the right to bear arms, all the things that the three of us understand very well. I have no problem with people that want to have conversations about where we're headed from a party standpoint, if we're too liberal, if we're too conservative, if we're right down the middle. That's all good stuff, and it has to happen. But number one, you got to stay in the room to have those conversations. Number two, you're elected to represent a district, not just your views, but the district that you're in. Number three, if there's individuals within the organization that don't agree with what we do. We had a phone call the other day when I was on Hennon, guys, that was talking about the 30% of the state of North Dakota that doesn't agree with Republican values, and we have to be Republicans. My comment was, no, you don't. You can be a libertarian. You can be a Democrat. But if you're a Republican, then you're going to come under the Republican tent. The Republican tent is what gave this state the economic boon that we have today. And I'm not going to take the credit for it. I'm just going to be the one to continue with that process. So I disagree with anybody that has a easy way out that says Republicans are bigots, because frankly, without Republicans, we wouldn't be in the position we're in. We'd be in the position that most of the East Coast is in. Most of the West Coast is in. That's not the position we want to be in.
What bothers me about, to Chad's point about, when we paint with broad brushes, I think what happens sometimes is we say every Republican's a bigot. I think that makes it harder to, if we're going to get accused of being bigots anyway, right? I think some people see that as license, right? Or they see it as, well, it becomes, I think, hard to identify actual bigots, right? Because people think it's the cried wolf thing, right? If you're calling everybody a bigot, then the term loses meaning. It's like when you repeat a word over and over again, right? And it just doesn't sound right anymore. Right. I think that's what we do. Perrie, you referenced I got it as well. The email sent out by the North Dakota Young Republicans responding to this, and the headline, for the audience, I know we've all read it, but for the audience that hasn't read it, the headline is NDYR statement on cancel culture. It reads, cancel culture has become the norm for addressing conflict. We cannot grow by negation. It won't take long before there is nothing left. We must talk about what faces us because truth is found through words. For this reason, the North Dakota Young Republicans leadership team is committed to fostering civil discourse among our members. We provide a platform that aligns with our mission to recruit, train, and elect young Republicans. NDYR rejects racial, sexual, and religious supremacy of any form. We reject the use of degrading and harmful slurs. We continue to stand with the NDGOP platform to defend traditional family values. We condemn the political weaponization of labels from the media and government against politically active Americans, regardless of their political ideology. We refute the libel cancel culture that has been attached to the Young Republicans. We support free speech that's guaranteed in the U.S. Constitution. Free speech means you can say what is on your mind without fear of legal action, but freedom requires responsibility. The comments in question from non-dues paying participants do not represent the organization as a whole. Are you satisfied with that statement?
I am mostly satisfied with that statement. I won't say I'm completely satisfied with it. And Daryl and I will have a conversation today. I did reach out to him yesterday, and in his defense, he reached out to me last night when I was tied up in a meeting. So his comment in there about nothing left towards the beginning of that article, Rob, that you just read. I have reached out now since being chairman, asking that question. What do you mean when you say there's nothing left or there's going to be nothing left? Let's be specific about our tirades. If we have something that we want to talk about and change the flow of the party or bring something new into the party, let's not just complain and have arguments about the direction of the party or that I don't agree with something. Tell me what it is you don't agree with. And let's talk about how to fix that, if it even can be fixed. But at least we have a conversation. Open statements like nothing left make no sense to me. Number two, he talked about responsibility, as you read farther down. There is a huge responsibility. We are held to a higher standard if we are Republicans, period. You're not just a Republican from 8 to 5. You're a Republican at a basketball game. You're a Republican at a convention. You are a Republican when you say you'll stand by the votes of the delegates within the convention, and then you turn around and do something opposite. You're a Republican when you have the individuals within this chat room that are trying to cover the fact they didn't want to get it out in the public. So that doesn't relate to me as being responsible. That relates to me as being we didn't get our way, so now let's try to figure out another way around it so we can get our way. I have a problem with that. I've run businesses for 40 years. I don't employ people like that. They're out the door in 2 seconds. You've got to have responsibility and you've got to be held accountable, period. And I think that's the discussion that I need to have with the Young Republicans and several others.
Just one quick follow-up. I mean, when I was reading that, they're talking about the media, which is me in this instance, and they're talking about cancel culture. And I don't take it personal. I understand that it's hard. When Rob Port's having a good day at work, someone's usually having a bad day. That's just the nature of my job. I don't delight in it. It is what it is. So I don't mind when people get upset, but the tone of it seemed to be the problem was not like I think when you start talking about cancel culture and the media and everything, it becomes like the problem is somebody found out about it, not that it was being said. And I realize that they also included in their condemnation for what was said. But why is it a problem that somebody brought this to light? I mean, it's only a problem because they're embarrassed about it, or the people who said it, or the people who are connected to it are embarrassed. To me, that's not our problem. I mean, I'm sorry you're embarrassed, but this was put out. I think the public deserves to know. People who hold elected office, people who would hold elected office, people who are activists and try to shape our politics and our policies. The public deserves to know, see behind the curtain sometimes. I don't think that's a problem.
I agree with that, Rob. I totally agree with that. I think that, to hide something and try to do something behind the scenes, to be very honest, I've been involved in politics 20 years. I've seen this as an MO since 2010, 2012. There's a group that simply throws a bomb in the room every time there's a meeting close, or every time they're trying to accomplish something, and then stands there and watches to see how the bomb explodes and how it's reacted to. That's not leadership. That's not what we do as Republicans. That's not what we do in business. That's not the way we should be communicating with each other. We can disagree, but we need to disagree from a very high level of respect for each other. And personal responsibility and accountability is what this group evidently doesn't want. And and as a leader in this party, a leader in the community, that is not acceptable.
And I hate the term cancel culture because so often it is just used as a way to not take responsibility for the words or your deeds that you did. That there's free speech, but there's consequences when you say things. I also think the thing that's sort of disturbing to me is, does this paint all young Republicans in this bad light? I mean, I think about people who are not in this group: Emily O'Brien, Michael Howe, John Godfrey, Tom Beadle. I mean, you can go down the list of really, really competent GOP leaders who are not part of this group. So it's not like everybody's part of this group. People are making a decision to coordinate with these folks and whatever. Speaking of it looks like you want to respond to that before I got to my question. Chairman Schafer, did you want to add something?
I do. I thank you for bringing that up, because you're 100% correct about that. And we have leadership within the GOP now on the state committee that are young Republicans that are fantastic leaders. Jacob Strinden, Tom Strami, Emily O'Brien's, people of that nature. John Oderman, he's on our executive board. Jacob Oderman is one of our leaders, district chairs out in 39. We have tremendous young Republicans that are on our executive board, in our state committee, on our district executive committees, and work their tails off for this party. Frankly, so I do not want to in any way, shape, or form have this incident reflect on the young Republicans within our state, because frankly, we welcome them. We want them a part of our party. We want to be able to work with them and build our party out, as has been done for me when I was a young Republican. That's been many, 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 many years ago. But with that said, you've got to you have to have some standards, and you have to have some values, and you've got to be held accountable. End of story. You've got to be responsible. So thank you for bringing that up.
And just in case John Godfrey listens to this, you're not that young, John. Barely make the list. So this Rick Becker announced he's running as an independent. How's the North Dakota GOP going to handle that campaign? How's John Hoeven going to handle that campaign?
Well, thank you for asking that as well. We're working on that actually very hard, to be honest with you. First of all, Rick Becker is running as an independent, and you said that. But he's stating in public he's running as an independent Republican. Not the case. He gave up his right to run as a Republican according to our rules, for 6 years. That was his decision. So I hope we're clear about that. I hope Rick's listening and paying attention, because if he has chosen to run against John Hoeven again, we are working very hard to tell the truth about Mr. Becker. Obviously, the man can't be trusted because he made it very clear at the convention that he will not run against the person that wins at the convention, and obviously that was Senator Hoeven. So if he chooses to run, which he has done as an independent, that's entirely up to him. He has the right and the freedom to do that. But he doesn't have the right to run as an independent Republican. So he'll need to change his verbiage there a little bit.
I saw speaking to your point there a little bit, I saw my colleague, Jeremy Turley, who's our Capitol reporter for the Forum News Service, and he tweeted when Becker announced his independent campaign, he tweeted this was the second time this election cycle that Becker told him he wouldn't be appearing on a ballot and then changed his mind. He had told him when he announced that he wasn't going to be running for re-election to his legislative seat in District 7, he said, I'm not going to be on a ballot this year. Then he ran for the U.S. Senate, which, okay, whatever, runs for the U.S. Senate, goes through the process at the convention, obviously a very vigorously contested convention that ultimately the delegates there, the majority of them, gave their votes to John Hoeven and said, we want him to be the Republican candidate. Becker opted not to allow statewide Republicans to weigh in on that on the June ballot. And now, after saying, he was done, he's back in it. So, to your point, the man can't be trusted. I mean, at least as far as this, what is the motivating factor at this point? I mean, I'm trying to think of what, and maybe I'm asking you to get into the mind of Rick Becker, but I can't figure out what's the angle here, right? Like, what step? Obviously he supports a slate. The young Republicans that we've been talking about, they're very much Rick Becker supporters. I mean, if I was reading through their messages, it was like a Rick Becker fan club in there. I mean, is he trying to create, get out the vote for some of his people down the ballot? But even that doesn't make sense. A lot of his candidates, they have the Republican nomination. A lot of them aren't facing serious opposition, if any opposition at all. So I what's the angle here? What's the point?
Yeah, I don't know. It's a good question. To your point about getting in the mind of Rick Becker, I had Rick in my office some time ago and had just a personal conversation with him. I don't despise the man at all. I think the man has done very well in business. I think he has a lot of good points, to be very frank with you. I think he has a lot of good ideas. I don't think he's wrong with respect to his conservative values for the state of North Dakota and being a Republican. However, you don't always get to be the one in the leadership seat, right? I mean, that's just the way the game works. Sometimes you got to be an Indian too. I mean, you got to be part of the process that builds the process. You can't always be the chief. So I'm not sure if it's an arrogance thing or if it's a narcissism thing or whatever it is with Rick, but I think he had a future in the Republican Party. He certainly doesn't now. I mean, he's made his decision, and that's entirely up to him. And when you associate with people that are not wanting to be held accountable, and they're not wanting to be responsible, and they want to hide what they're doing, and they don't want the public to know what's going on behind the scenes. What's the purpose in that? I don't understand the purpose in that. If you've been elected, if you've won a primary and you're going to be seated as a legislator, likely in your district, and you're still siding with someone that has now been beat twice and now is hopefully going to be beat again in the general, and is claiming to have all of the answers, maybe you ought to relook at which direction you're headed. I mean, that's the best answer I can give you. I don't want to talk negative about Mr. Becker. I think he, frankly, has a lot of good ideas. I think that he has some things that could be very helpful for the Republican Party, but certainly his approach could use some educating. There's no question about that.
Perrie, before we go on, I want to give you an opportunity. I think the language around Indian and chief is probably something you want to be a little careful about using in the future, because it certainly made me feel a little uncomfortable, and I assume it might make others feel uncomfortable. So I just want to give you a little advice moving forward in our PC world, that I'd be careful about that.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
So Cara Mund is running as an independent. She will follow the 6-year bylaw as well. In practice, how would that work? Cara runs for Congress in 2 years or 4 years. I mean, she was an intern for Hoeven. She decides to run for the legislature as a Republican. Are you guys really not going to allow her on the ballot?
Yeah, she's made her decision. The difference between Cara and Rick is Cara hasn't said she was a Republican. She hasn't been to any Republican. The only thing she's done that I know of that's Republican is worked for John for one short period of time.
And those internships aren't necessarily partisan. I know a lot of Republicans who worked for Conrad and Dorgan and Pomeroy, and a lot of Democrats who have worked for Hoeven and Kramer. So I don't know. Sure. Those aren't even truly partisan positions.
Right.
But the answer to your question, Chad, is the rules are the rules. The state committee makes the rules. My job is to enforce the rules. And no, she's if she decides that she wants to be a Republican, good. We'll welcome her to the circle of Republicans. But there's still rules to follow. So the answer would be no. She will not be on stage as a Republican for 6 years.
How about if somebody just runs in because anybody can file the petitions, right, to run
sure.
as in the primary. And if Rick Becker decides to run in District 7 again in 4 years in the primary and wins, I mean, you all really can't do anything about that, right? I mean, it's a private organization, but with state rules that apply to that.
That's a different scenario. Yeah, exactly right. You're exactly right, Chad.
Well, Perrie, I appreciate you coming on, and I appreciate all your time. You promised us a half hour, and we got every minute of it. So I really appreciate your time today.
Gentlemen, thank you. I really appreciate what you do as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Hi there, my name is James Wallner. I produce and host the podcast Dakota Spotlight, a true crime podcast that tackles historical and unsolved crimes in the upper Midwest. Follow along with me as we search for a missing girl, attempt to solve a 45-year-old murder, and much, much more. That's Dakota Spotlight Podcast, anywhere you get your podcasts, or at inforum.com/podcasts.
Okay, just I guess Chad, we can start off here putting a period at the end of the sentence of our interview with Perrie Schafer, who I mean, to his credit, listen, this stuff is not, as a party leader, and especially representing as big a tent as the Republican Party is in North Dakota these days, that's a tough position to be in, to take clear stands, even on something like this. Unfortunately, this shouldn't be controversial.
Yeah, I mean, I was really impressed with how he handled all this. I mean, even the question about, okay, now what? What are you going to do to these folks? He didn't say, oh, well, free speech, whatever. He said, we're having conversations and we're going to handle these on an individual case. And I heard in District 11, they might be asking this Carter gentleman to step down as a candidate.
Well,
that's the interpretation I took.
Right. That was my interpretation as well. I have no insight into that. The chairman hasn't told. I don't want to get the conspiracy theorists going. The chairman hasn't shared any of that to me. I believe him when he says that he wants to be thorough and meticulous in that, and I think that's fair. But that's what I heard, is that there's a very real possibility that at least one, if not more, of these people may find themselves outside of the Republican circle. And I think some of the things he's made, like I know the Republican Party has, kind of with Kara Mund coming on the ballot, and we're going to talk a little bit more about her in a bit, but her coming on the ballot, and a lot of people have been kind of critical of the party for this rule about if you run as an independent, there's a cool down period before you can seek, at least through the convention process, a Republican endorsement again. I don't really have a problem with that. I think it's a way of expressing that if you want to be a Republican, then, you can't really have a history of out there campaigning against Republican candidates. Like, there is a point at which, listen, this is a political party. We all need to be pointing in the same direction.
Listen, and at the end of the day, as we've seen over the last 2 or 3 cycles, the convention process is becoming less important, right? I mean, the primary seems to be the place where people are going. I mean, again, we've done this before, but Kevin Kramer went through the primary. Doug Burgum went through the primary this last legislative. I mean, it seemed like half the districts had. So it's probably not going to be that big of a deal in practice. If Cara Mund or Rick Becker wants to run as a Republican, and I don't know if Cara Mund considers herself a Republican. I mean, based on some of her views, I mean, she might actually just be an independent, not like either of the parties. Which seems that might be a majority. That might be a majority opinion in this state.
I'm still. And see, the problem is once you have to actually start articulating positions on policy, which outside of a couple of hot button issues, we haven't heard a lot. that's substantive from her yet. Although I should announce for the podcast audience, we've talked about, I have every statewide race booked. Two of the Democratic candidates, Ms. Moniz in the PSC race, as well as Tim Lamb in the AG's race, are not participating, but every statewide Republican candidate and their opponents are participating. And in the House race coming up here on September 7th with Mark Haugen, Kelly Armstrong, Kara Munn told me late last night she'll be participating in that one. So I'm really looking forward to the opportunity to asking, honestly, some very direct questions. And I think it's going to be tough because she's getting into this race so late. We have a really short timeline to learn about her. And to get some articulate points out of her.
But I will tell you, if anybody can do this, she's generating earned media like nobody's business. You think about the Jim Shaw column, you think about the Lloyd Omdahl column, you think about, she literally she can get earned media whenever she steps out. Does that matter that much? I think we'll figure that out. What do voters care about? You and I have talked about the depth of a lot of voters and what they care about. And so I'm looking forward to the conversation, even though 3 candidates and 2 moderators who can't shut up, it might be hard to hear much from any of the candidates.
Yeah, well, it might, and we may have to also book her subsequently. I had offered for her to come on the podcast even before that, but she told me that she doesn't really want to do anything like that until she's on the ballot officially, which, obviously is frustrating for me, but she has her reasons for that. So I don't know. I'm a little skeptical of somebody having that luxury when you're getting in so late. You kind of owe voters the courtesy of explaining who you are and subjecting yourself to not just me, but anybody who wants to ask you some questions.
But Rob, how often do we hear campaigns are too long and candidates are spending all their money all the time raising money, whatever?
Yeah.
Let's let this play out. I want to learn more. I think this is intriguing.
Oh, sure. Yeah, it's intriguing because Democrats don't have, all due respect to Mark Haugen, she came in, obviously her claim to fame is a hot button issue for Democrats right now. And the candidate who was on the ballot has the opposite position and wasn't really, again, I love Mark Haugen to death, wasn't really exciting a lot of people. So yes, I understand that this is very exciting for the state's progressives like Jim Shaw and Lloyd Omdahl and you. I'm just not seeing a path to victory. And I think she's going to have a tough time when she has to start getting real about some of her positions. And who are you going to vote for House Majority Leader, for Speaker of the House? Who are you going to caucus with in Congress? She's going to have to answer some of these things, and those are going to define her. And once she starts getting defined, her popularity is going to reflect that.
Yeah, but the key for her is there a segment, and it has to be a large segment, of Republicans who are looking for an alternative? And I'm not seeing, Kelly, I don't agree with everything, but people like Kelly. By and large, people like Kelly. So I struggle to find the path as well. But I welcome anybody who wants to run.
I want to be clear. Yeah, I realize that I'm sounding cynical. I have a, and this I do because I think she's a nice person. I think she's got a lot of promise. I'm interested. Celebrity candidates leave a bad taste in my mouth.
I also think celebrity candidates is a bit derogatory towards a person who went to Harvard Law School. This is a very smart,
Dr.
ambitious...
Oz. Ted Cruz also went to Harvard.
Sure, but let's give her a chance. She hasn't been. Well, Ted Cruz isn't a celebrity candidate. He's just a bad person.
He's a politician who behaves himself like a celebrity.
Yeah,
which is just the other side of that coin, I guess. I had to pause for a moment there. If the audio sounds a little weird, we had a little bit of a glitch with our recording, but I was saying Ted Cruz is the other side of the coin from the celebrity thing. And listen, again, I'm not trying to be too pejorative, but I'm looking at Dr. Oz, I'm looking at Herschel Walker, I'm looking at Donald Trump, and I'm Jesse Ventura. I don't like these people who are like, listen, I was Miss America, put me in Congress. I'm sorry.
Here's the deal.
I'm starting point. To me, I'm holding that against you. Like, if you were a celebrity before you run for office, that's something in my mind that helps you. That's something you have to overcome in my mind.
Kara Munn is a North Dakotan who's gone out and graduated from Harvard Law School, went to Brown University, stood up to the people against that were running Miss America. Let's give her a shot, Rob, before we just assume
I'm happy to give her a shot. But...
Yeah, don't you dare compare her to Herschel Walker, for God's sakes. My God,
I don't think Miss America is a line item that I care about on your resume for Congress any more than football star is.
Then start calling her a Harvard graduate in North Dakota that does great work rather than beauty queen, and then we won't have to worry about that. But did you hear what Herschel Walker said about trees? He doesn't care about the environment because we already have too many trees. Don't compare anybody to Herschel Walker.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm sorry. I don't like celebrity candidates that much. So to me, that's something she has to overcome. But
you're defining her as a celebrity candidate. You don't have to do that.
Except that it's true. But for the fact that she was Miss America, would she be getting the sort of earned media that you're talking about right now? It's obvious. I mean, it's obviously a boon to her campaign, at least as far as that goes.
Listen, I think there's a lot of candidates who get into races who have advantages if they have personal wealth, if they have families that are connected. Sure. So, I mean, if we're going to call that out, we need to call it out on all the other candidates too. Let's talk about young Republicans. That's more fun.
Okay. We'll talk about the young Republicans. They did come out. I read that statement when Perrie was on. And the point I made to Perrie is, talking about bringing up I understand, and I do want to give them credit that far where they are now denouncing this stuff. They didn't have a lot to say about the slurs. And by the way, it wasn't just homosexual slurs. I mean, there were posts in there. I had to Google this because I had no idea what this person, but it's a video of a guy who hijacked an airplane. He was like ground crew. He hijacked an airplane at the Seattle-Tacoma airport.
Yeah, I remember when that happened.
Was flying it around. And I guess it's become something of significance to white supremacists because during his conversations with ground control, and ultimately he committed suicide. He crashed the plane on purpose into an island in Puget Sound. But I guess when he was talking to ground control, one of the things he asked was, do you think, if I land this thing successfully, do you think they'll give me a job? And then he said something like, oh, I'm kidding. They would never do that. I'm white. And so because of that, it's become a white supremacist trope. And then in the Young Republicans group, you have somebody who posts it, says, I will never not post this on the anniversary of it happening. And oh, by the way, until the Jews ban me or something like that from the news media. I mean, so it wasn't just, I mean, there was a lot of different things going on in that group. And so it's great that you're condemning it now. I wish that you had done something about it when it's happening. And to invoke cancel culture and all this. And listen, I don't like the term either. That is a real thing. There are efforts left and right to get people who say controversial things to shut up. It's a real phenomena, but it's also deployed by people who should be accountable for the horrible things they say and just don't want to be. And so they try to portray themselves as the victims. The North Dakota Young Republicans are not victims in this. You are not a victim of me reporting what you said accurately. That doesn't make you a victim.
Yeah, and I keep going back to, if these things are being said and nobody's pushing back with these prominent, these young Republicans who want to be something, who are something already, right? I mean, Representative Cole Christensen, Representative Claire Corey, Brandon Pritchard, Ethan Harsell, Matt Heilman, Dawson Hawley, Carter Eisenberger. I think all of them, other than Ethan and Carter, are going to be legislators because they're running unopposed or they're already in the legislature. They were part of this group. And it makes me wonder, what are the conversations looking like when they're in person, when they're sitting around a bar, when nobody's listening, nobody can record whatever.
If they're that comfortable in a group with 100 people in it.
Yeah, just spouting this kind of stuff.
And by the way, it appears as though the group, as of last evening, it does appear that group spin is no more. My source says it's apparently gone now. I can't get it to come up a Telegram anymore. They weren't adding me as a member anyway.
But again, I mean, they only stop saying this stuff or shut it down once they're caught. And then their biggest complaint is that they're caught. Their complaint isn't that they're saying this bigoted stuff.
Right.
And again, I think it makes all Republicans look bad.
And that was my argument in the NDYR with the NDYR statement. Great. I'm glad you're condemning the language. Don't talk about cancel culture in this. I think cancel culture is something we can talk about in other contexts. Don't talk about it in this one where you're deploying it to try to distract from the fact that because you're making it sound like the problem is me. Like the problem is me and my whistleblower source, who by the way was also a North Dakota Young Republican, who saw this stuff and said, you know what, I'm going to blow the whistle on this. And by the way, good for that person.
So why didn't that person call him out then?
Well, they did.
I mean,
they did. They hadn't been a member of the group. You know, I don't want to provide a ton of detail.
But why didn't they call it out in the group? I mean, why didn't they say this is unacceptable? I mean, that's the only way this is going to change is if Republicans call out Republicans and Democrats call out Democrats.
You know, I don't want to put my perception of that is that, you know, there were so many people who are consequential. Jared Hendricks, it was an advisor to Rick Becker's campaign. He's the chairman of the term limits ballot measure. He's the chairman of the District 38 Republicans. Andrea Toman was Rick Becker's campaign manager. What? There were so many influential sitting lawmakers, legislative candidates. You know, I think he wanted. I think there was a desire on behalf of my source to show the public what was going on, and frankly, I agree with that.
And let's not forget, Jared Hendricks was also Kevin Cramer's deputy campaign manager, right? So it's not like there's these different factions. They're all sort of there's different factions, but there are connections throughout the Republican Party. I just think that if we're not I mean, kudos to you for going public with this. But they have to be calling each other out. I mean, because you call them out and they all think they're victims. And again, I go back to the quotes from the people you talk to. I mean, most of them claim, oh my God, I've never seen this. I've got nothing to do with this. But I mean, Claire Corey, you went back and looked and you saw that she actually commented on stuff.
That was one of the things is you had ugly comment, and then not that far down the list is Jared Hendricks writing about how his term limits group is going to sue the state over their ballot measure being kept off the ballot. So how did you not see that? How did you not see those things? You know, Claire Corey said, you know, she hadn't seen or hadn't participated, but she had replies in there. She had comments in there. And again, I can't vouch for what anybody, you know, sees or doesn't see. I can't prove that with certainty, but these messages were being, juxtaposed to, the Jews control the media is, hey, let's go out door knocking for Carter Eisenberger, right? Like, these are not, it was happening and nobody was saying anything. And I'm very, very dubious that some of these people were missing those messages. And maybe they just thought it's the internet, people say wild things, whatever. I'm sorry, that's not good enough.
Well, and Rob, we're not sort of mentioning the elephant in the room here. This is a Trump thing, right? Trump made it acceptable to say outrageous stuff on the internet with very little accountability.
Well, that was,
and so
yeah. I mean, so when I called Ben Schierick, who is the president of College Republicans, and he's the one who used the homophobic slur, you know, his reaction was to, like, while I'm talking to him on the telephone, mock me in the telegram and double down on his use of the slur. And listen, anybody can mock me. I know what I look like. I'm eminently mockable. That doesn't bother me at all. What bothered me is just this absolute refusal to be accountable. And that is absolutely a Trump thing, right? Like, he doesn't have defense. He only has offense. And I mean, to say that attitude is not central to that wing of the Republican Party. Look, Rick Becker's television show is called No Apologies. I think they mean it.
Yeah, and again, for their statement to talk about taking responsibility and personal responsibility for this stuff while taking no responsibility for this group. And again, I don't think we should. It sounds like the gentleman who's in charge of North Dakota Young Republicans wasn't even necessarily part of this group. I mean, it seems like they're trying to create.
A lot of the people in the group were using
Sure.
clearly fictional names or internet names or whatever. There's a lot of people. I don't know. I identified who I could identify.
And did you? And do you know what their dues structure is? I mean, to say somebody's non-dues paying, I mean, does that mean anything?
I don't know. I mean, it sure seemed like they were participants. It sure seemed like. I mean, it's. I don't know. I mean, I know the North Dakota Republican Party. If you want to show up for a district meeting, they're usually happy to have you, and they're usually not. Not that. They're not going to turn you away or there's a ticket taker at the front there demanding your dues. Like, if obviously there's certain things if you want to participate in to vote or whatever, but it's it's pretty loose. Like, I know how the NDGOP operates. If you want to show up to go door knocking or to put signs out or to whatever, they aren't going to demand your dues from you. Now, if you want to vote, in a convention or something, that's different. But generally, they're not turning people away. So that whole were not dues paying members things.
Well, and I just, the fact that the NDSU president had to come out with a video on the student senate at NDSU had to come out because this gentleman who's the head of the NDSU Republicans, I mean, made them look bad, makes the university look bad.
Well, also, I mean, he told me, in one of his comments in the thread, he said, because when he was responding to me having called him, he says, this is going to be the least triggering thing I do this year. When I was on the telephone with him, he told me, "Yep," he was just proud of it. He goes, "Yep, I'm going to go hard," and I'm trying to remember what exactly he said, but it was basically like, "I'm going to go hard on campus. I'm going to be everywhere. I'm going to be doing all this." Goodness, that sounds like somebody the campus may want to keep an eye on.
Yeah, well, and that's how you become a political celebrity these days, right? I mean, so is that what he's looking for? I guarantee he's got a bunch more Twitter followers today than he did a week ago. From a
certain milieu, yeah. I mean, and that's I think if there's any one thing that I hate the most about there's so many things I hate about what Donald Trump's done to American politics, but and not just Donald Trump, by the way. Donald Trump's capitalized on a lot of things that were pre-existing. I don't think the left did us any favors by calling Mitt Romney and George W. Bush and John McCain, who, I'm sorry, agree with their politics or not, were honorable people, and within the norms of American politics. Paul Ryan wants to push elderly people off a cliff. These guys are plutocrats and racists and terrible. When you do that, and the right does it too, it diminishes the meaning of those terms. Like, we have spent so much time demonizing each other that we have left room for people who are actually what we accuse each other of being. They can slip in kind of, I don't want to say unnoticed, but you know what I mean? Like we've diminished that. We've diminished that power.
Well, I think it's interesting to think about Romney and Bush and McCain and, Democrats like me who were very, very concerned about those people getting into office because of the terrible things that they would do to our country. And now I think we're all longing for those days where you've got just sort of people who are in the normal sphere of politics, leading our country.
The big date was like Medicaid expansion, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was so normal, but yeah.
And maybe we didn't need to call each other horrible names or accuse one another of wanting people to die over Medicaid expansion, because that's what we were doing to each other. And I draw a straight line from that to this.
Yeah, but that's also just like the political consultant class that I think, and that happened starting in the late 80s, early 90s, actually going back a lot further than that, where, I mean, that sort of stuff breaks through. And part of it is the voters' fault too, right? You see a commercial with a little old lady falling off of a mountain.
They do it because it works. They do it because it works.
Yeah, and so you pay attention to that kind of, and you have to break through, especially like, when you remember 2018, where you couldn't turn on the TV. If you tried to watch the local news, it was 90% political commercials of, Kramer and Hoeven or their independent expenditure groups just beating the heck out of each other. Did we just get bleeped? Am I going to get fined by the FCC? I don't get paid for this.
No, this is a podcast.
I can say whatever I want.
Well, there is another FCC that we have to be thinking of called Forum Communications Company.
Oh, okay.
I don't think we're going to get in trouble over one S word, but let's not make a habit of it, Chad.
I apologize, Mr. Marcio.
Yeah. I do too. Please don't fire me. Over Chad's profanity. I don't think anybody cares that much. I mean, we're really getting into some. I just think, and I'm really trying to. I think that there are ways to break through and to be provocative without demonizing people. And I think I do it. I think I'm pretty successful at it. I said there's nothing wrong with throwing some sharp elbows, right? There's nothing wrong with being passionate about your stance. There is something wrong, though, if you've crossed the line into thinking that the other people are bad, are evil. We got a problem. And I think that line for a lot of people just doesn't exist anymore.
Well, you know what you can do to help in this whole thing? Start calling Cara Mund Harvard graduate instead of beauty queen.
Okay, I mean, the problem is her beauty queen thing is her claim to fame. So I'm sorry that bothers you, but it's accurate. I'm not making it up. I'm not using it as a pejorative. This is why she's famous. Lots of people graduate from Harvard and Brown. Not all of them are very smart either.
No, well, she is.
Yeah, I'm sure she is. I mean, listen, I'm trying to. Maybe I am being too cynical. I don't know, but I will tell you, it's not a partisan thing because I don't like Dr. Oz either. And you think it's unfair for me to put her. What I'm saying is that she has to overcome that in my mind. Prove to me that you're something more than this. This is why you're getting a lot of attention. Prove to me that you're something more than that. That's my argument.
Guarantee Cara Mund calls a veggie tray and not crudité. I guarantee that. She's no Dr. Oz.
Right. Well, listen, as a practitioner of an expansive vocabulary, I don't have a problem. I think the rest, I hate stuff like that. There are so many reasons to think that Dr. Oz is a poor candidate to be in the United States Senate. Him using crudité as opposed to veggie tray or charcuterie instead of meat and cheese. I don't like, this is the least important thing to me, but this is what we do, right? Like the person who wins the Senate campaign in Pennsylvania is going to be whichever campaign is better at Twitter. And that sucks. That is a terrible, terrible thing, but it's the truth.
Whoever comes out of that campaign is going to be a star too. John Fetterman is going to be a star because he doesn't look like a senator. Dr. Oz is going to be a star because he's a celebrity. And then, then they get in there and they have to figure out, are they roll up their sleeves and get things done? I mean, which Al Franken sort of did when he was a celebrity candidate, which came to a crashing end at the end. So I don't know. I think crudité is funny.
Well, it is. Although, I mean, as the person who gets attacked all the time, like I don't understand why people are fixated on me using big words, right? And I don't like. I'm not trying to be like, I don't know, conceited about it. But it's just I read a lot. I always have, and my high school friends, like when I was in high school, would make fun of the way I talked because I just always have. I don't know what it is. I just have. It's just a natural thing for me. I always wonder, like if you hear a word you don't understand, look it up in the dictionary. Learn something new. Maybe use it yourself. Words are fun.
So you're part of Big Dictionary.
I'm part of Big Dictionary.
Dictionary is pushing you to use these big words, so people have to buy dictionaries.
I'm cashing checks from the Oxford English Dictionary people. No, I'm not. And by the way, I at this point, because of the conspiracy-minded nature of our society, I now have to do a disclaimer and tell you all that I'm not actually paid off by the Oxford English Dictionary. Oh gosh,
I would just love for there to be posts about you being in bed with Big Dictionary.
Dictionary. I mean, I will tell you, like, I would actually kind of enjoy that. Like, I don't know. I think it's a good thing. Like, if you know lots, like it used to be a good thing to be erudite, to know a lot of words. That used to be something people looked up to. Now it's all, well, that's not how Joe Sixpack talks. We can't talk like that. Like, well, yeah, let's drag everything down to the lowest common denominator. That's been great for American politics.
That was a great impression you did of like the normal voter. People can't see it on the podcast, but you also did a walk.
Yeah.
The Joe Sixpack walk. I like that.
Yeah. Well, we could probably, if you want to, plumb the depths once again of my feelings about populism, but we probably don't need to do that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know if we have anything else to talk about these young Republicans. I think Perrie Schafer is handling this well. I think that we'll see what actually comes out of this, but I think Republicans calling out Republicans is the only way we root this kind of stuff out and get it out of our politics.
And Democrats calling out Democrats.
Yeah.
I mean, there's plenty of left of center people on Twitter who say things that are embarrassing. I think what we could all do too is knock off the nut picking. Right? Like let's find the craziest person in a given movement or at a protest or in a room and brand everybody at that protest or in that movement or in that room with that person. I think that.
But Rob, Yeah, I think about if there was a chat room with 100 young Democrats who were taking shots at Catholics or some other demographic like this, and how it would have exploded in a different way, or maybe it's the same way, but I just think about, when there's a bunch of prominent young Democrats a few years ago, if they participated in this kind of stuff and were using terminology about different demographics like they're using against Jewish people and homosexual people, I would hope that Dems would have called them out, but I feel like it would have been even a bigger story than what this has become.
Yeah, well, it's become a pretty big story, but I think it doesn't matter. Like if you're practicing in hate, then it should be called out. It just should be. So, well, that's all the time we have for this week. I appreciate it, and tune in next week for sure. I am looking forward to the news for Chairman Schafer as he moves forward with this, because I think there has to be accountability. I think that's the way out of this stuff, is the people who believe this stuff. There has to be consequences.
Right. And I look forward to our debate in a couple of weeks with 3 congressional candidates. I think that is going to be awesome. It's probably going to be one of the first times that they get to talk, amongst themselves about comparing where they are on issues. It's going to be awesome.
It's going to be, I've been trying to use the word, because, debate, when we watch them on TV, like the presidential debates, they're so structured. I really do want this to be a conversation, and I don't plan on you and I talking a lot. I think we're going to try to guide it. We're going to ask some questions and give them some prompts. But for the most part, I want everybody to talk, and I want it to be just a conversation among human beings that hopefully illuminates that race for voters. I should say that our first debate, and it's not really going to be a debate because the Democratic opponent, I've tried to contact her through her campaign contact information. Dem NPL Chairman Patrick Hart reached out to her for me. Melanie Moniz is not getting back to me, so it's just going to be Julie Fedorchak in that PSC race. We'll talk to her for an hour. That'll be the first one in the series. Then after that, the 7th will be the House race, and we'll go from there. Chad, thanks for your time.
Thanks, Rob.
Did you know Forum Communications Company has a robust podcast library? At inforum.com/podcasts, we have everything from politics, sports, true crime, outdoor adventure, and more. Visit inforum.com/podcasts and explore them all today.